A racist police officer pulls over a black man for no reason. After he arrests the man, he realizes that he has just arrested the mayor of the city. Marcus Jones tapped his fingers rhythmically on the steering wheel. It had been a long day at City Hall, filled with back-to-back meetings and pressing decisions. He was looking forward to a peaceful evening at home. As he approached the intersection of Maple and Oak, the blaring flash of blue and red lights pierced the twilight. Marcus's heart sank. He hadn't been speeding or breaking any laws. His first instinct was to pull over safely and check his rearview mirror, where he saw the police cruiser parked behind him. He eased his car to the side of the road, the gravel crunching softly beneath his tires. The cruiser's engine hummed as the officer inside prepared to exit. Marcus took a deep breath, his fingers gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. The officer, a burly man in his mid-30s, stepped out of the car and approached with a determined stride. His uniform was impeccably pressed, and his badge glinted in the fading light. Marcus rolled down his window as the officer reached his vehicle. "Good evening, officer," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Evening," the officer replied curtly, leaning slightly into the window. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Marcus furrowed his brow. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's eyes narrowed as he peered into the car, his tone sharp and dismissive. "Well, I'm going to need to see your license and registration." Marcus handed over the documents, trying to keep his composure. "Is there a specific reason you stopped me?" The officer took the documents, scrutinizing them with an air of suspicion. "I noticed you were driving a bit too close to the center line. I'm just making sure that everything's in order." Marcus glanced at the empty streets around them, feeling a rising sense of unease. "I don't recall crossing the center line. I've been driving this route for years without incident." The officer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he tapped the documents against his palm and studied Marcus with a steely gaze. "Where are you headed?" "Home," Marcus replied. "It's been a long day. I just want to get back." The officer's demeanor hardened. "You seem a bit too relaxed for someone who's been driving a bit too close to the center line." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Confusion etched on his face. "I'm just trying to comply with your request. I'm not sure why this is becoming such an issue." Without warning, the officer's tone grew more accusatory. "Well, let's see if there's anything else we should be concerned about. Step out of the vehicle." Marcus's heart raced. "Is that really necessary?" "I haven't broken any laws." The officer's expression remained stern. "It's a standard procedure. Just step out." Reluctantly, Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the car. The officer began to search the vehicle, his movements methodical but laden with a palpable sense of hostility. Marcus watched from the curb, feeling a mix of frustration and apprehension. "I assure you there's nothing illegal in the car." The officer continued his search, muttering under his breath. "We'll see about that." Minutes ticked by as the officer rummaged through the car. Marcus noticed a couple of passing pedestrians casting curious glances their way, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. Eventually, the officer straightened up and faced Marcus, a smirk playing on his lips. "Well, everything seems to be in order, but I still don't like the way you're handling this." Marcus tried to keep his voice calm. "I don't understand what's happening here. Can I please go now?" The officer ignored the question. "You're not going anywhere until I'm satisfied. I'm going to need to run a check on your records." Marcus felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. "I'm not sure why this is happening. I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's gaze was unwavering. "Just sit tight. I'll be back with your results." As the officer returned to his cruiser, Marcus stood by the roadside, his mind racing. He glanced at his watch, noting the time. He was already running late. What should have been a routine drive home had turned into an unsettling encounter, leaving him with a growing sense of unease. As the officer made his way back, Marcus took a deep breath and tried to calm his racing thoughts. The night was settling in around them, and the quiet of Cedarville seemed to contrast sharply with the tension that had suddenly erupted. Marcus stood on the side of the road, the chill of the evening air seeping through his coat. The officer's cruiser was parked with its lights still flashing, casting a pulsing blue glow over the quiet street. Marcus shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to keep his anxiety in check. The officer, Reynolds, was seated in his car, his face illuminated by the dashboard lights as he spoke into the radio. The minutes ticked by slowly, and Marcus's frustration grew. He glanced around, noting the few passers-by who had stopped to watch the scene unfold. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity and concern, but none ventured close. After what felt like an eternity, Reynolds emerged from his cruiser and walked back towards Marcus, holding a clipboard. His face was set in a tight frown, and his eyes bore into Marcus with an unsettling intensity. "All right," Reynolds said, flipping through the papers on the clipboard. "I'm going to need to check your trunk." Marcus's patience was wearing thin. "I've already told you there's nothing illegal in the car. This feels excessive." Reynolds' eyes narrowed. "It's standard procedure. Now open the trunk." Reluctantly, Marcus unlocked the trunk and lifted it open. Inside were a few bags of groceries and a gym bag. Nothing out of the ordinary. Reynolds peered inside, his scrutiny giving way to a palpable sense of suspicion. "Anything else in here I should know about?" Reynolds asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Marcus sighed. "No, just groceries and personal items. Can I please go home now?" Instead of responding, Reynolds continued to inspect the trunk with an air of superiority. He seemed to take his time, as if searching for something to justify the stop. Marcus watched, growing increasingly frustrated as Reynolds' behavior became more intrusive. "Look, this has gone on long enough," Marcus said, his voice rising. "I don't see why I'm being treated like this. I've been cooperative and polite." Reynolds shut the trunk with a slam, turning to face Marcus with a smug expression. "Well, now that we're done with the car, I need to verify your information." Marcus's eyes widened. "Verify my information? What exactly are you looking for?" Reynolds didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled out his phone and began typing furiously. The air between them crackled with tension, and Marcus felt a knot of dread settle in his stomach. A few minutes later, Reynolds looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. "I'm going to issue you a citation." "A citation for what?" Marcus asked, incredulity evident in his voice. "I haven't broken any laws." "Your record check came back with some discrepancies," Reynolds said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "It's just a precaution." Marcus tried to remain calm, but his frustration was palpable. "Discrepancies? I've given you all the correct information. I don't understand why this is happening." Reynolds ignored Marcus's protests and began filling out a citation. The process seemed to drag on, each minute stretching longer than the last. Marcus felt a mix of anger and helplessness as he watched Reynolds work with a deliberate slowness. Finally, Reynolds handed Marcus the citation, his demeanor still stern. "You need to sign this." Marcus glanced at the paper, his eyes scanning the illegible scrawl of legal jargon. "I don't agree with this, but fine. I'll sign it." As Marcus signed the citation, Reynolds' expression remained unyielding. "You'll receive a court date in the mail. Until then, you're free to go." Marcus took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. "Thank you. I hope this issue can be resolved quickly." Reynolds didn't respond, turning on his heel and heading back to his cruiser. Marcus watched him go, feeling a heavy weight of injustice settle over him. He climbed back into his car, the evening's chill sinking into his bones. As he drove away, Marcus glanced at the citation in his hands, a mixture of anger and resignation bubbling within him. The peaceful evening he had anticipated was replaced by an unsettling encounter that left him questioning the fairness of the system he had always trusted. The drive to the Cedarville Police Precinct felt interminable. Marcus's mind raced with a jumble of thoughts, his frustration mounting with each passing minute. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting fleeting shadows that danced across his windshield. When he finally arrived at the precinct, he was met with the harsh glow of fluorescent lights and the bustling activity of the police officers inside. Marcus, still handcuffed, was led through the entrance by Officer Reynolds, whose stern expression hadn't softened since the traffic stop. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the quiet street. The clamor of phones ringing, the murmur of conversations, and the clatter of keyboards filled the space. Marcus's heart pounded as he was escorted past the reception desk and into the booking area. "Why am I being treated like this?" Marcus asked, his voice strained. Reynolds didn't respond, instead directing Marcus to a metal bench near the booking counter. Marcus sat down, his hands still restrained behind his back. He glanced around at the busy officers and clerks, trying to ignore the stares of curiosity and occasional frowns from the staff. A female officer approached, her face a mask of professionalism. "What's the charge?" Reynolds glanced at Marcus. "Suspicion of illegal activity. We're just processing him for now." The officer's eyebrows furrowed. "Oh, illegal activity? For what?" "Discrepancies on his record," Reynolds said, his tone dismissive. The booking officer looked at Marcus, her eyes softening with a hint of sympathy. "Name?" Marcus Jones, he replied. I'm the mayor of Cedarville. The booking officer paused, her expression shifting from professional to surprised. You're the mayor? Marcus nodded, his frustration evident. Yes, I don't see how that changes anything, but I need to know why I'm being detained. The booking officer turned to Reynolds, confusion and concern evident in her gaze. Why wasn't this information verified before bringing him in? Reynolds' face hardened. It was just a routine stop. We had to follow procedure. The booking officer sighed, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. I'll need to confirm his identity and get this sorted out. As she worked, Reynolds stepped away to make a call. Marcus could hear the murmurs of conversation and the occasional clatter of paperwork. The tension in the room was palpable, and Marcus's frustration mounted as he waited. After several minutes, the booking officer returned with a small stack of papers. I've confirmed your identity, Mr. Jones. I'm afraid Officer Reynolds' actions were not appropriate. Marcus's eyes narrowed. So what happens now? The booking officer sighed. We'll need to release you, and I'll make sure this situation is reported. As the officer removed the handcuffs, Marcus rubbed his wrists, feeling the sting of the metal. He stood up, his body tense with lingering anger and disbelief. Reynolds returned, his face a mix of defiance and irritation. You're free to go. You'll receive a citation in the mail. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. I want to understand why this happened. This was an abuse of power. Reynolds' gaze remained cold. You'll have to take that up with the department. Marcus turned on his heel and walked toward the exit, his frustration evident in every step. As he left the precinct, he could hear the faint murmur of conversations behind him, the buzz of activity continuing unabated. The night air was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the heated emotions Marcus felt. He got into his car, his mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. The peaceful evening he had hoped for had been shattered by an unjust encounter, leaving him with a deep sense of betrayal and a growing determination to address the wrongs he had faced. As he drove home, the lights of Cedarville blurred past him. Marcus knew this incident was more than a simple traffic stop gone awry. It was a reflection of deeper issues that needed to be addressed. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This was far from over. The Cedarville Police Precinct loomed large and imposing in the dim light of early evening. The Cedarville Police Precinct was still abuzz with activity as Marcus Jones sat in the small, windowless room designated for interviews and briefings. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh, sterile glow over the room's plain walls and wooden table. The door to the room creaked open, and Detective Mitchell entered. He was a tall man in his early 50s, with graying hair and a serious demeanor. He nodded at Marcus before taking a seat across from him, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. Mr. Jones, Mitchell began, his voice steady but laced with an undertone of unease. I understand there's been a bit of a mix-up. I'm here to get to the bottom of this. Marcus looked up, his frustration evident. It wasn't just a mix-up. I was stopped, searched, and detained without cause. Officer Reynolds didn't give me a straight answer about anything. Mitchell nodded, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. We've been reviewing the reports and talking to witnesses. This is more than a simple procedural error. There are serious issues here. As Mitchell spoke, the door opened again, and Officer Reynolds walked in, his face a mask of stubborn defiance. He glanced at Marcus before taking a seat beside Mitchell. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as Reynolds settled into his chair, avoiding eye contact with Marcus. Mitchell looked at Reynolds, his expression shifting from professional to stern. Officer Reynolds, could you explain your actions? Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. I pulled Mr. Jones over because he was driving too close to the center line. I followed standard procedure in conducting a search and checking his records. Marcus interjected, his voice rising. Standard procedure? I was compliant and polite. There was no reason to escalate the situation like that. Mitchell's eyes flicked between Marcus and Reynolds. You understand, Officer Reynolds, that this isn't just about the traffic stop. There are allegations of racial bias and misconduct. We need to understand why you acted the way you did. Reynolds' face hardened. I did what I thought was necessary to ensure there was no illegal activity. If there's an issue with my methods, then that's something the department will have to handle. Mitchell's gaze was steady. We're handling it now. Mr. Jones's identity was verified, and it's clear that his treatment was unwarranted. I need you to explain why you proceeded with an arrest when there was no legal justification. Reynolds' expression remained resolute. I was doing my job. If Mr. Jones had nothing to hide, then he wouldn't have been upset. Marcus's frustration boiled over. I was upset because I was being treated unfairly. This isn't just about me. It's about how you treat everyone. Mitchell raised a hand, signaling for calm. Officer Reynolds, you're suspended pending further investigation. We will review your actions and decide on appropriate disciplinary measures. Reynolds stood up, his face a mixture of anger and defiance. This is ridiculous. I was just following the rules. Mitchell's voice was firm. The rules are there to protect everyone, not to be used as a tool for bias and misconduct. We'll be conducting a full review of your actions tonight. As Reynolds left the room, Marcus looked at Mitchell, his frustration tempered by a glimmer of hope. What happens now? Mitchell's expression softened slightly. We'll conduct a thorough investigation. Your experience will be used to address the shortcomings in our procedures and ensure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. Marcus nodded, feeling a mix of relief and weariness. I appreciate that. I just hope this leads to real change. Mitchell stood up, extending a hand. We'll do everything we can to make sure it does. Thank you for your patience and cooperation. Marcus shook Mitchell's hand, feeling the weight of the evening's events slowly lifting. As he left the precinct, the night air felt cooler, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere inside. The experience had been unsettling, but it had also brought clarity to the issues that needed addressing. Driving home, Marcus's thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions. The night's events had exposed deep flaws in the system, but they had also provided a path forward. The road to reform would be challenging, but Marcus was determined to see it through. The lights of Cedarville passed by in a blur, a reminder of the work that lay ahead and the hope for a better, more just future. The next morning, the sun rose over Cedarville with an unexpected warmth, a stark contrast to the turmoil Marcus Jones had faced the previous night. The town hall was a stately building, pointing its red brick facade and large windows reflecting the early light. Inside, the atmosphere was a blend of the usual administrative bustle and a heightened sense of urgency. Marcus arrived at the town hall, his face a mask of determination. The weight of his recent experience was heavy, but his resolve to address the injustices and work towards meaningful change kept him moving forward. He was greeted by his assistant, Carla, a diligent woman in her late 30s, with a knack for organization and a warm demeanor. Good morning, Mr. Jones, Carla said, handing him a stack of papers. We've got a full agenda today. How are you holding up? Marcus took the papers, glancing at them briefly before looking up. Morning, Carla. I'm managing. Let's get started. I want to address last night's events head on. Carla nodded, her concern evident. I've arranged a meeting with the police chief and the city council members. They're expecting you. Marcus walked into his office, a spacious room filled with light and neatly organized furniture. The room was a refuge from the chaos of the outside world, but today it felt like a battleground where crucial decisions would be made. A few minutes later, Marcus walked into the conference room where Chief Anderson and several city council members were already gathered. The room was arranged with a large table in the center, and everyone was seated, ready for the discussion. Chief Anderson, a seasoned officer with a calm but authoritative presence, looked up as Marcus entered. Good morning, Chief, Marcus said, shaking hands with Anderson. Thank you for meeting with me on short notice. Chief Anderson nodded. Good morning, Mayor. We're here to discuss last night's events and how to move forward. Marcus took a seat at the head of the table, his posture straight and his expression resolute. Last night's incident was deeply troubling. Officer Reynolds' actions were not only unwarranted, but also indicative of a larger problem within our police force. Councilmember Davis, a middle-aged man known for his straightforward approach, spoke up. We've all seen the reports. This isn't just about one officer's misconduct. It's about systemic issues that need to be addressed. Marcus nodded in agreement. Exactly. It's essential that we take a comprehensive approach to address these issues. We need to review our procedures, ensure proper training, and most importantly, rebuild the trust between the police and the community. Chief Anderson leaned forward, his expression serious. We're committed to addressing these problems. We've already started an internal review, but we need your support to implement lasting changes. Marcus glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of each council member. What kind of changes are we looking at? Chief Anderson took a deep breath. First, we need to ensure that our officers are held accountable for their actions. This means revising our disciplinary procedures and ensuring transparency in how we handle complaints. We also need to invest in training programs that address issues of bias and improve community relations. Councilmember Garcia, a young woman with a reputation for championing social justice, added, "We should also consider creating a civilian oversight board. This board would provide an additional layer of accountability and ensure that community concerns are heard and addressed." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. A civilian oversight board could be a significant step forward. It would give the community a voice in overseeing the police department's actions and help restore trust. Chief Anderson agreed. A board like that would need to be carefully structured to ensure effectiveness and fairness. We'd need to define its powers and responsibilities clearly. Councilmember Davis looked at Marcus. "How do you propose we move forward with these changes?" Marcus took a moment to gather his thoughts. "We'll need to draft a proposal outlining these reforms. We should also hold public forums to gather input from the community. It's crucial that the people of Cedarville are involved in this process." Chief Anderson nodded. "That's a good approach. Engaging the community will be vital in ensuring these changes are effective and have broad support." The discussion continued, with details about the proposed reforms being hashed out. There were debates about the specifics of the oversight board, the scope of the training programs, and the mechanisms for ensuring accountability. Despite the challenges, there was a clear sense of purpose among those present. As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, but the commitment from the police chief and the city council members to address the issues was a crucial first step. The support of the community and the dedication to meaningful reform would drive the change needed to rebuild trust and ensure justice. Marcus left the conference room, the weight of the previous night's events tempered by the sense of progress. The path to reform was just beginning, but for the first time there was a tangible sense of direction and a collaborative effort to tackle the issues head-on. As he walked through the hallways of the town hall, he felt the early morning light on his face, a reminder of the new beginnings and the potential for positive change. The journey ahead would be demanding, but Marcus was determined to see it through, for the sake of Cedarville and its community. The Cedarville Town Hall's main auditorium was packed by the time Marcus Jones arrived for the public forum. The room buzzed with the energy of concerned citizens, local activists, and community leaders, all gathered to discuss the recent events and the proposed reforms to the police department. Marcus could feel the collective tension and anticipation as he walked through the crowd, heading toward the stage at the front of the room. The auditorium was a large space with high ceilings and rows of chairs that extended from the front to the back, all facing a large makeshift stage. The stage was equipped with a podium and a few chairs for the panelists, which included Chief Anderson, a representative from the Civilian Oversight Board, and and several city council members. Marcus took a deep breath, preparing himself for the evening. He stepped up to the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. The room quieted as he began to speak, his voice carrying a blend of authority and empathy. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. I know that many of you are deeply concerned about the recent incident involving the police and the subsequent issues of trust and accountability. I want to assure you that we are taking these concerns seriously and are committed to addressing them." A murmur of approval swept through the crowd. Marcus continued, "Tonight we're here to discuss the proposed reforms and hear your thoughts and suggestions. We want this process to be transparent and inclusive, and your input is crucial." Chief Anderson stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding attention. "We've outlined several key areas for reform, including changes to our disciplinary procedures, enhancements to officer training, and the creation of a civilian oversight board. Our goal is to ensure that such incidents are addressed appropriately and that we rebuild the trust between the police and the community." The crowd was a mix of curious, hopeful, and skeptical faces. After Chief Anderson finished, the floor was open for public comment. One by one, citizens stood up to voice their opinions and experiences. The diverse range of voices reflected the community's deep investment in the issue. A young woman named Lisa, known for her activism, took the microphone first. "I've seen how biased practices have impacted our community. It's crucial that the Civilian Oversight Board has real power and isn't just a symbolic gesture. We need to ensure that the board can effectively hold officers accountable." Marcus nodded, acknowledging her concerns. "Thank you, Lisa. We're aware of the importance of making sure that the Oversight Board has meaningful authority. We're working on defining its powers to ensure it can make a real impact." A middle-aged man named Tom, who had been a resident of Cedarville for decades, spoke next. I've lived in this town my whole life, and this is the first time I've seen the police and the community come together like this. It's a step in the right direction, but we need to make sure that the reforms are implemented effectively and that they address the root causes of these issues. Marcus addressed Tom's comment. I appreciate your perspective. Implementation is key, and we're committed to following through on these reforms with accountability and diligence. Throughout the evening, various members of the community expressed their views, ranging from support to criticism. The dialogue was candid and passionate, reflecting the deep-seated issues and the hope for genuine change. As the forum progressed, Marcus was struck by the recurring themes in the comments: the need for transparency, accountability, and meaningful community engagement. The public's engagement was a powerful reminder of the collective desire for reform and justice. Toward the end of the forum, a local pastor, Reverend Johnson, spoke with a calm and measured tone. We all want a safer and more just Cedarville. It's important that we approach these reforms with unity and an understanding that true change takes time. Let's support each other and work together to make this town a better place for everyone. Marcus felt a surge of hope as he listened to Reverend Johnson's words. The evening had been intense and emotional, but it was clear that the community's commitment to change was strong. The dialogue had provided valuable insights and reaffirmed the collective will to address the issues at hand. As the forum concluded, Marcus stepped down from the stage, feeling a mix of relief and determination. The evening had been a testament to the community's resilience and dedication to justice. The work ahead would be challenging, but the engagement and support of the citizens of Cedarville were crucial for the success of the reforms. Walking out of the auditorium, Marcus glanced back at the room, now filled with the quiet hum of post-forum conversations. The discussions had laid the groundwork for the changes needed to rebuild trust and ensure accountability. The road to reform was still long, but Marcus was resolute in his commitment to seeing it through. As he stepped into the cool night air, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper connection to the community he served. The sun had barely risen over Cedarville as Marcus Jones walked through the town hall, the familiar morning routine tinged with a renewed sense of urgency. The public forum from the previous evening had set a clear path forward, and today marked the beginning of putting those plans into action. The office buzzed with activity, and Carla was already at her desk, sorting through a stack of documents. Good morning, Mr. Jones, Carla greeted him as he entered, her tone bright despite the early hour. I've got the latest updates on the reform initiatives and a few reports from the police department. Marcus nodded, taking a seat at his desk. Morning, Carla. Let's go over everything. I want to make sure we're ready to hit the ground running. Carla handed him a folder containing the latest drafts of the reform proposals, along with a list of key action items. Here's the draft of the Civilian Oversight Board proposal, along with the proposed schedule for the training programs. The police department has also sent over their initial feedback. Marcus flipped through the documents, noting the detailed plans for the Oversight Board and the training programs. The proposals were comprehensive, addressing many of the community's concerns from the forum. Still, he knew that implementation would require careful oversight and commitment from all involved. Let's start by reviewing the feedback from the police department, Marcus said, scanning the pages. I want to understand their perspective before we move forward. Carla nodded, tapping a few keys on her computer to bring up the relevant reports. Here's the feedback from Chief Anderson and his team. They've raised a few concerns about the proposed timeline and the logistics of the training programs. Marcus reviewed the feedback carefully. The concerns were mostly logistical, such as the feasibility of the proposed training schedules and the need for additional resources. While these were valid points, Marcus was determined to keep the momentum going. I see their concerns, Marcus said, setting the documents aside. We'll need to address these issues, but not at the expense of our timeline. Let's schedule a meeting with Chief Anderson and the training coordinators to work out the details. Carla nodded, taking notes. I'll arrange that meeting for later this morning. I'll also draft a response to the police department addressing their concerns. With a plan in place, Marcus prepared for his meeting with Chief Anderson. He reviewed the key points of the reform proposals and formulated his responses to the concerns raised by the police department. As he walked through the town hall corridors, he felt a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The meeting room was set up with a large table and several chairs, and Marcus arrived to find Chief Anderson already seated, reviewing some documents. The chief looked up as Marcus entered, offering a nod of acknowledgement. "Good morning, Chief," Marcus said, taking a seat across from him. "Thank you for meeting with me. I want to address the feedback you provided and discuss how we can move forward with the implementation of the reforms." Chief Anderson nodded. "Good morning, Mayor. I appreciate your willingness to work through these issues. We're committed to making these reforms effective, but there are rather practical considerations we need to address." Marcus nodded. "I understand. Let's start with the concerns about the training programs. What specific issues are you facing with the proposed timeline?" Chief Anderson reviewed his notes. "The primary issue is the availability of resources and trainers. The proposed schedule is quite ambitious, and we're concerned about our capacity to meet these deadlines without compromising the quality of the training." Marcus leaned forward, considering the chief's words. "We need to balance the urgency of these reforms with practical constraints. Perhaps we can adjust the timeline slightly and prioritize key areas of training. We can also explore options for additional resources, including external trainers if necessary." Chief Anderson's expression softened slightly. "That could work. We also need to ensure that the training is comprehensive and addresses all aspects of the proposed reforms." Marcus nodded. "Agreed. Let's work on a revised schedule that incorporates your feedback and ensures that the training remains thorough and effective." As the discussion continued, Marcus and Chief Anderson worked through the details of the revised training schedule and the logistics of implementing the Civilian Oversight Board. The dialogue was constructive, with both parties focused on finding practical solutions to the challenges at hand. By the end of the meeting, they had agreed on a revised timeline and a plan to address the resource concerns. Chief Anderson seemed more receptive, and Marcus felt a sense of progress. "Thank you for your cooperation, Chief," Marcus said as the meeting concluded. "I believe we're on the right track. Let's keep the lines of communication open as we move forward." Chief Anderson shook Marcus's hand. "I appreciate your understanding. We're committed to making these reforms work, and will do everything we can to support the process." As Marcus left the meeting, he felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead was still challenging, but the collaborative effort to address the issues and implement the reforms was a positive step forward. Walking back to his office, Marcus passed by the bustling activity of the town hall, a reminder of the community's engagement and support. The work of reform was just beginning, but the progress made in the meeting and the commitment from both the police department and the community were promising signs. Marcus sat down at his desk, the updated documents and action items spread out before him. The journey of reform was far from over, but with each step, Cedarville was moving closer to a future marked by greater accountability and trust. The challenges were significant, but the path forward was clear, and Marcus was determined to see it through for the benefit of the entire community. The Cedarville Police Department's training facility was buzzing with activity as officers gathered for the day's session. It was an unusually crisp August morning, and the early sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a bright glow over the room. The training facility was equipped with a mix of classrooms and practical exercise areas, all designed to handle various aspects of law enforcement training. Marcus Jones arrived at the facility, accompanied by Carla and a few of his staff members. Today was a significant day, the beginning of a new comprehensive training program designed to address the issues highlighted by the recent reforms. Marcus was eager to see the changes in action and to ensure that the training met the community's expectations. Inside the main training room, Chief Anderson was already at the front, preparing for the session. The room was arranged with rows of chairs facing a large presentation screen. Officers were seated, chatting quietly as they waited for the session to begin. The air was filled with a mixture of anticipation and curiosity. Marcus walked to the front of the room, where Chief Anderson greeted him with a nod. "Good morning, Mayor. We're ready to get started. Thank you for joining us today." Marcus smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Good morning, Chief. I appreciate the opportunity to observe the training. I'm looking forward to seeing how these new programs are implemented." As the session began, Chief Anderson introduced the day's agenda. Today's training will focus on bias awareness, community engagement, and revised disciplinary procedures. We have several guest instructors joining us to cover these topics comprehensively. The first session was led by Dr. Elena Martinez, a renowned expert in bias training. She began with an engaging presentation on the impact of unconscious bias and its effects on policing. The room was attentive, and the officers listened carefully as Dr. Martinez outlined practical strategies for recognizing and addressing biases in their daily interactions. Marcus observed the officers' reactions closely. Some seemed engaged and thoughtful, while others appeared skeptical. The content was challenging, but Marcus hoped it would provoke meaningful reflection and change. After Dr. Martinez's session, there was a break for refreshments. Marcus took the opportunity to speak with a few officers, trying to gauge their impressions of the training so far. Officer Collins, a middle-aged veteran with a gruff exterior, spoke candidly. "It's good to see some new perspectives being brought in. We've been doing things a certain way for a long time, so it's definitely an adjustment." Marcus nodded, understanding the challenges of change. "I appreciate your openness. These reforms are meant to improve our practices and rebuild trust. Your feedback is valuable in making sure we're heading in the right direction." The next session focused on community engagement, led by a local activist, Maya Johnson. She shared her experiences and insights on effective communication between law enforcement and the community. The session included role-playing exercises where officers practice handling various scenarios, emphasizing empathy and active listening. The officers seemed more engaged during Maya's session, participating actively in the role plays and asking questions. Marcus noticed a shift in the room's energy, a positive sign that the training was resonating with the participants. As the day progressed, the final session addressed the revised disciplinary procedures. A legal expert, Thomas Reed, explained the new procedures for handling complaints and ensuring accountability. The session included detailed examples of how the new procedures would be applied and what officers could expect in terms of oversight and consequences. By the end of the day, Marcus felt a sense of cautious optimism. The training had been intense and thought-provoking, but it had also sparked meaningful discussions and reflections among the officers. As the session wrapped up, Marcus approached Chief Anderson. "Chief, how do you feel the training went?" Marcus asked. Chief Anderson looked thoughtful. "Overall, I think it was productive. There's a lot of new information for the officers to digest, but the sessions were well received. We'll need to follow up with additional training and support to ensure these concepts are fully integrated into our daily practices." Marcus nodded in agreement. "I'm glad to hear that. It's important that we keep the momentum going and continue to provide support as the officers adjust to these changes." As the officers filed out of the training room, Marcus took a moment to reflect. The training day had been a significant step forward, but it was just the beginning of a larger process. The commitment to reform would need to be sustained through ongoing training, community involvement, and consistent oversight. Marcus walked out of the facility, the crisp air feeling refreshing against his skin. The day's events had shown that while change was challenging, it was also possible and necessary. As he drove away from the training facility, he felt a renewed sense of determination. The road to reform was long and fraught with obstacles, but the progress made that day was a crucial part of building a better future for Cedarville. Marcus was committed to seeing the process through, ensuring that the training and reforms would lead to a more accountable and community-focused police department. As the sun began to set over Cedarville, Marcus reflected on the day's achievements and the work still ahead. The journey of reform was ongoing, but with each step, the town was moving closer to a more just and equitable future. The days following the implementation of the new police training program were filled with anticipation and cautious optimism. Cedarville's community, having actively participated in the discussions and reforms, was eagerly watching to see the tangible outcomes of the changes. Marcus Jones felt the weight of responsibility as he prepared for the evening's town hall meeting, where he would provide an update on the progress and address any concerns from the public. The town hall was once again filled with residents, their faces reflecting a mix of hope and skepticism. The large room was arranged with rows of chairs facing a stage, where a panel of officials, including Marcus, Chief Anderson, and several city council members, was ready to address the community. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of urgency as the citizens awaited concrete evidence of the reforms taking effect. Marcus took his place at the podium, glancing around the room. He saw familiar faces from previous meetings and new ones, their expressions a blend of anticipation and wariness. As he began to speak, his voice carried the weight of the community's expectations. "Good evening, Cedarville. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're here to provide an update on the recent reforms and to hear your thoughts on the changes that have been made. Your involvement has been crucial in this process, and we want to ensure that we're moving in the right direction." Chief Anderson stood up next to Marcus, ready to share updates on the police department's progress. Over the past few weeks, we've implemented new training programs focused on bias awareness, community engagement, and updated disciplinary procedures. We're committed to ensuring these reforms lead to meaningful change. The room was quiet as Chief Anderson spoke, the audience attentive and serious. After his brief update, the floor was open for public comments. The first speaker, Lisa, who had been vocal at the previous forum, took the microphone. "I appreciate the efforts being made," Lisa began, her tone measured but firm. "However, we need to see consistent results. Are there specific metrics or benchmarks that we can look at to evaluate the effectiveness of these reforms?" Marcus nodded, acknowledging the importance of transparency. "Yes, Lisa, we're working on establishing clear metrics to evaluate the success of the training programs and the overall impact of the reforms. We plan to release regular reports to keep the community informed about our progress." As Lisa returned to her seat, Tom, the longtime resident who had previously expressed cautious optimism, stood up. "I'm glad to see the changes happening, but what about ongoing communication with the community? How will we ensure that feedback continues to shape the reform process?" Marcus responded, "We're committed to maintaining open lines of communication. We'll continue to hold regular town hall meetings and provide updates through various channels. Community feedback will remain a key part of the reform process." The next speaker, a young man named Jordan, raised a concern about recent interactions with police officers. "I've noticed some positive changes, but there are still moments when I feel like the officers don't fully understand or respect the community they serve. What steps are being taken to address this?" Chief Anderson addressed Jordan's concern. "We're aware that building trust takes time. Our training programs are designed to address these issues, and we're continually evaluating and refining our approaches. We encourage ongoing dialogue and feedback to help us improve." The comments continued, a mix of praise, concern, and suggestions. The discussions were candid and reflective of the community's diverse experiences and perspectives. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that while progress had been made, there was still work to be done. Reverend Johnson, who had spoken positively at the previous forum, offered a perspective of hope. "We've seen positive steps forward, but let's continue to work together to address the remaining issues. Change is a process, and it's important that we remain united and focused on our shared goals." Marcus appreciated Reverend Johnson's words of encouragement. "Thank you, Reverend Dickelson. It's essential that we stay committed to this process and support each other as we move forward." As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus and Chief Anderson took a moment to reflect on the evening's discussions. The community's engagement was a testament to their investment in the reform process. The feedback provided was valuable and highlighted both the progress made and the areas needing further attention. Walking out of the town hall, Marcus felt a mix of satisfaction and resolve. The community's response had been thoughtful and constructive, reinforcing the importance of continued transparency and engagement. The path to reform was ongoing, but the collective effort of the town was a powerful force for positive change. The night air was cool as Marcus left the town hall, the quiet streets of Cedarville reflecting the calm after a busy and meaningful evening. The work ahead would be challenging, but with the support and involvement of the community, Marcus was confident that Cedarville could continue to build towards a more just and equitable future. As he drove through the town, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey of reform was far from over, but each step taken was a step towards a better Cedarville, guided by the shared commitment to justice and community.
The sound of skin striking skin echoed through the Denny's. His open palm connected with her cheek, the crack silencing every conversation in the restaurant. Picture this. A police officer standing over a black woman, his face contorted with rage, her cheek reddening from the impact. For a moment, time froze. Forks stopped midway to mouths. Coffee cups hovered above tables. And then the phones came out, recording everything. The woman touched her cheek slowly, her eyes never leaving the officer's face. Something stirred in the restaurant. A collective intake of breath as she calmly reached up and removed her wig, revealing close-cropped natural hair beneath. Officer James Caldwell's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The woman before him was no ordinary civilian. The recognition hit him like a physical blow as he took an involuntary step back. Judge Maya Williams. the federal appeals court judge who would be deciding his fate at next week's brutality hearing. How did a suspended cop with a history of brutality end up facing the very judge who would decide his career's fate? And what happened next would change both their lives forever. Let me take you back to where it all began. Judge Maya Williams was known throughout the legal community for her unwavering fairness. Her chamber's light burned late most nights, casting a warm glow onto the courthouse steps below. Tonight was no different. Her fingers moved quickly across her keyboard, her reading glasses perched at the tip of her nose. Case files were stacked neatly on her desk, each one representing someone's worst day, someone's hope for justice. She reached up, massaging her temples before adjusting her wig, a sleek, shoulder-length style that felt increasingly heavy as the night wore on. The salon-perfect hair wasn't about vanity. It was armor. Maya leaned back in her chair, her mind drifting to the moment that changed everything. 3 years ago, she'd been pulled over for the 5th time in 2 months, always for routine checks that somehow only happened to her and other black drivers. The memory played like a movie in her mind. The officer approaching her car, hand resting on his holster, his tone dripping with suspicion until he glimpsed her judicial badge. The immediate shift in his demeanor. License and registration wouldn't be necessary after all, Judge Williams. Have a nice evening, Judge Williams. So sorry to bother you, Judge Williams. But when she was just Maya, just another black woman in a nice car, the story played out differently. The questions never ended. The suspicion never faded. The implied threat always lingered. So she started wearing the wig when off-duty. A simple disguise that let her move through the world anonymously, experiencing it the way most people did, until she needed the power of her position to protect herself. The case file open on her computer had kept her working late this particular night. Officer James Caldwell, badge number 4726. 3 excessive force complaints in 18 months. All involving black citizens. All dismissed due to insufficient evidence, despite witness statements and hospital records. Until now. Until the dashcam footage that couldn't be explained away. Until the hearing that she would be presiding over next week. Maya rubbed her eyes. The facts were damning. The video showed an unarmed teenager being thrown to the ground, Caldwell's knee pressing into his neck for nearly a minute after handcuffs were secured. Across town, Officer James Caldwell slammed his locker shut, the metal clang echoing through the nearly empty police station. 3 weeks. 3 weeks suspension pending a hearing that could end his career. His grandfather had been police. His father too. The badge wasn't just a job, it was his identity, his birthright. And now some judge who'd never worn the uniform, never felt the fear of patrolling the streets, was going to decide if he was fit to serve. The station felt different lately. Whispers when he walked by. Some officers wouldn't meet his eyes. Others clasped his shoulder firmly, their silent support worth more than words. Well, you can't take up a whole booth with your... He gestured dismissively at her papers, whatever this is. A few patrons they understand, Caldwell thought. They know what it's like out there. The split-second decisions. The constant danger. How are you supposed to do this job when everyone second-guesses every move you make? He checked his phone as it buzzed with a text message. Captain Reynolds, his father's old partner. We've got your back. Don't worry about next week's hearing. Something loosened in his chest. The blue line. The brotherhood. At least some things never changed. Caldwell walked out to his truck, his suspension weighing on him like a physical thing. He needed coffee. Needed to be around normal people who didn't look at him like he was either a hero or a monster. Just another night shift ending at dawn, even if he wasn't officially on duty. Back in her chambers, Maya closed Caldwell's file. The photos of the teenager's bruised face seared into her memory. The body camera footage showed everything, including Caldwell's casual comment afterward. Just another thug learning a lesson. The police union was fighting hard for his reinstatement. The mayor had called her personally, just checking in on the case schedule, nothing improper. But the message was clear. Maya had received 3 death threats since being assigned to the case. Her email was flooded with messages calling her anti-police, a race baiter. Words she wouldn't repeat even in the privacy of her own mind. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could do something? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The judge knew what she risked by taking this case head-on. Any sign of bias, any slip during the hearing, and the appeals would drag on for years. The union lawyers would paint her as an activist rather than an impartial jurist. Her reputation for fairness, the thing she valued most in her professional life, would be questioned. But the footage didn't lie. The medical report didn't lie. And someone needed to ensure that justice was served, regardless of who wore a uniform and who didn't. Maya closed her laptop and gathered her belongings. The sun would be rising soon. She needed sleep. She needed breakfast. She needed to be sharp for the final preparations for the hearing. There was a Denny's on her way home, open all night, quiet in the early morning hours. The perfect place to review her notes one more time over coffee and eggs. She slipped her wig back on, checking her reflection in her office window. Judge Williams disappeared. Just Maya now. Just another black woman stopping for breakfast. Anonymous. Unremarkable. She couldn't know that Officer Caldwell had the same idea. That the Denny's near the courthouse was about to become the setting for a confrontation that would change both their lives forever. Maya gathered her files, tucking them into her leather messenger bag. The weight of the responsibility settled on her shoulders as she turned off her office light and headed out into the pre-dawn darkness. Just a quick breakfast, a chance to gather her thoughts, and then back to work ensuring that justice was served, regardless of who stood before her in the courtroom. The fluorescent lights of Denny's buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow across the nearly empty restaurant. Maya sat alone in a corner booth, case documents spread before her, her coffee growing cold as she highlighted key passages from Caldwell's file. The bell above the door jingled. Maya didn't look up, too absorbed in her work to notice the man who entered. But he noticed her immediately. Officer Caldwell scanned the restaurant, his eyes narrowing when they landed on the black woman occupying an entire booth. His body tensed, shoulders squaring as he walked directly toward her table, bypassing the "please wait to be seated" sign. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, the word "ma'am" dripping with condescension. "This table is reserved for paying customers who actually order food." Maya looked up slowly, her expression carefully neutral despite the immediate recognition flickering in her mind. She'd studied his face in photos in the body camera footage. But he didn't recognize her, not with the wig, not out of context. "I've ordered the Grand Slam," she replied evenly. "It's coming shortly." Caldwell's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath the skin. The restaurant wasn't even busy. Several empty booths lined the wall. His irritation seemed to grow with her composure, with her refusal to be intimidated. At nearby tables glanced over, the tension in the air palpable. An elderly couple exchanged worried looks. A young man with glasses slowed his chewing, watching. Maya calmly gathered her documents into a neat pile, her movements unhurried. She could feel her heart rate increasing but kept her breathing steady, her expression unchanged. "I'm preparing for a case," she said. "I'll be done soon." "A case?" Caldwell snorted, looking around as if inviting others to join in his disbelief. "Right. And I'm the Attorney General." His hand slammed down on her documents, the sound making everyone jump. "Let me see some ID." Now, the restaurant grew quieter. The waitress behind the counter stopped wiping the surface, her cloth frozen mid-circle. Maya's eyes flashed, the first crack in her calm facade. "I'm not driving. I'm sitting in a restaurant. You have no probable cause to demand identification." The veins in Caldwell's neck bulged, blue lines standing out against his reddening skin. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that somehow seemed louder than his previous words. "Listen here," he hissed. "I know your type, acting educated, playing victim when you're asked to follow simple rules." Maya's gaze dropped to his chest, to the nameplate that confirmed what she already knew. "And I know your type too, Officer Caldwell," she replied, her eyes meeting his again. Something inside him snapped. Later, witnesses would describe it as seeing a switch flip. One moment he was standing there, the next his arm was in motion. The crack of his open palm against her cheek echoed through the suddenly silent restaurant. The sound hung in the air like a thunderclap, followed by gasps from every corner. Maya's head barely moved with the impact. She touched her cheek slowly, then straightened her shoulders. With deliberate calm that belied the adrenaline coursing through her veins, she reached up and removed her wig, revealing her close-cropped natural hair beneath. Caldwell's face drained of color as recognition dawned in his eyes. He took an involuntary step backward, stumbling slightly against the next table. "Judge Williams," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't—" "Judge Maya Williams," she corrected, rising to her full height. "Of the Federal Appeals Court. The same judge who will be presiding over your brutality hearing next week." She gestured to the documents on the table. "I was just reviewing your case file, actually." Phones were up everywhere now, recording from every angle. The restaurant had gone completely silent except for the soft beep of a coffee maker finishing its cycle. "You've just committed assault, Officer Caldwell," she continued, her voice steady despite the red mark blooming on her cheek. "In front of at least 15 witnesses. And unlike your previous victims, I have the power to make sure you never wear that badge again." Caldwell's hand moved instinctively toward his holster, a movement Maya caught immediately. Behind him, the manager approached, his face ashen. "Is everything okay here, Judge Williams?" the manager asked, recognition and respect in his voice. Maya never broke eye contact with Caldwell. "No," she said simply, "but it will be." Officer Caldwell was just leaving. Caldwell stood frozen, his world collapsing around him. Every phone pointed in his direction captured the moment his career truly ended. Not in the hearing room where he'd planned his defense, but here in a Denny's at dawn, by his own hand. Judge Williams remained upright, dignified despite the handprint forming on her cheek. "What you've done today isn't just assault," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent restaurant. "It's the final evidence that you should never again wear a badge meant to protect and serve." The manager hovered nearby, recognition dawning as he connected the dots. "Judge Williams," he repeated, the name carrying weight beyond just the title. "The judge from the Ramirez case. The one who reformed juvenile sentencing." She gave him a small nod but kept her eyes fixed on Caldwell. The officer's breathing had grown shallow, his face ashen. His right hand kept twitching toward his holster. Not reaching, just twitching, a nervous habit that felt far more threatening in this context. The patrons watched, mesmerized by the power shift. The man who had stormed in with such authority now seemed to shrink before their eyes. "I'll escort you out, sir," the manager said, deliberately placing himself between Caldwell and the judge. Caldwell backed away, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. Something dangerous flickered in them, not just fear or anger, but a calculated assessment. For a moment it seemed he might say something more. Instead, he turned sharply and pushed through the door, the bell jingling with false cheerfulness at his exit. Only when the door closed did Maya allow herself to sit down again, straightening her documents with steady hands that betrayed none of the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Are you all right, Your Honor? Would you like me to call someone?" the manager asked, concern etched across his features. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied, though the sting on her cheek suggested otherwise. The waitress appeared with ice wrapped in a clean towel, offering it with a sympathetic nod. The restaurant slowly returned to its normal breakfast rhythm, though patrons kept glancing her way. Maya pressed the ice to her cheek, her mind racing through the implications. The hearing would need to be reassigned now. Her impartiality was compromised not by her actions but by his. Her phone buzzed against the table. Unknown number. She tapped the screen, expecting a message from the courthouse. Instead, 5 words glowed up at her. "Everyone has secrets, Your Honor." A second message followed. This was just the beginning. Not even federal judges are untouchable. Maya stared at the screen, her coffee growing cold beside the case file that now seemed more personal than professional. How did they have her private number? Who was they? Her gaze drifted to the documents, Caldwell's history, the witness statements, the dismissed complaints. This wasn't about one officer with anger issues. The text confirmed what she'd suspected reviewing the case files. Caldwell had protection, connections that reached higher than a police captain or union rep. Maya set down her phone, suddenly aware of all the eyes still watching her, all the phones that had recorded everything. Except for the text message. Except for the implication that someone powerful enough to access her private number was backing Caldwell. The ice numbed her cheek as her mind raced. Only when the restaurant had fully returned to normal did her hands finally begin to tremble, the delayed shock setting in. She'd faced racism before. The law professor who suggested she'd only been admitted to fill a quota. The client who requested the other attorney when she was still in practice. The security guard who followed her through department stores. The countless traffic stops. But this was different. This was targeted. This was a system closing ranks. Her phone rang, the courthouse this time. Judge Williams? It was Carla, her clerk. Word reached us about what happened at Denny's. Videos are already online. Judge Harris suggested you might want to recuse yourself from the Caldwell hearing now, considering the circumstances. Of course, they'd want her to step aside. Clean and simple. Caldwell would get a different judge, one without personal grievance against him. The slap would become a separate issue, minimized and eventually forgotten. Maya touched her cheek again, the pain returning as the ice melted against her skin. In her mind, she saw the footage from Caldwell's body cam. The unarmed teenager gasping for breath, begging for mercy. She thought about the text message, the threat behind it. If she stepped away, who would take her place? Someone without the courage to stand against the pressure? Someone willing to look the other way? I will not be recusing myself, Carla, she said firmly, surprising even herself with the decision. Document the incident as evidence in the existing case file. I'll be at the courthouse within the hour. She ended the call before her clerk could protest. The threat lingered on her phone screen, a warning of what might come. But Maya Williams hadn't become a federal judge by backing down from difficult truths. Whatever secrets they thought they had, whatever power they wielded, it wouldn't be enough. Justice demanded courage. And today, she'd found more of it than she knew she possessed. 1 week later, the marble hallway of the federal courthouse echoed with whispers as Judge Maya Williams walked toward the hearing room. Her chin was lifted, her gait measured and deliberate. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a yellowish shadow, but she'd made no attempt to hide it with makeup. The whispers followed her like ripples in water. She's actually going through with it. Can you believe she didn't recuse herself? How can she claim to be impartial now? Inside the hearing room, Officer Caldwell sat with his defense team, his uniform pressed and perfect despite his suspension. His supporters filled 3 rows behind him. Fellow officers, union representatives, even the police chief himself. Their presence was a statement, a show of force. Caldwell's eyes met hers as she entered, a flicker of smugness crossing his features. He leaned over to whisper something to his attorney, who nodded with apparent confidence. The hearing began with standard procedures, introductions, statements of purpose. Maya's voice remained steady as she acknowledged the unusual circumstances. Before we proceed with scheduled testimony, she announced, there is new evidence pertinent to this case that must be entered into the record. Caldwell's attorney rose immediately. Your Honor, with all due respect, any interaction between yourself and my client outside these proceedings should be addressed separately. You should have recused yourself, and we reserve the right to appeal on those grounds. The hearing committee shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Maya had anticipated this. The incident at Denny's restaurant is directly relevant to the pattern of behavior under review, she replied, and I have the authority to make that determination. She nodded to the clerk, who connected a laptop to the room's display system. The video began to play, high resolution, captured from multiple angles, showing Caldwell's unprovoked aggression, the slap, Maya's revelation of her identity, and his instinctive reach toward his weapon. The room fell silent as the videos played one after another. Even Caldwell's supporters couldn't maintain eye contact with the screens. The evidence was undeniable, the parallels to the original case too obvious to ignore. When the lights came up, the committee members' expressions had hardened. No one spoke for several long seconds. Caldwell's attorney attempted damage control, arguing context, stress, provocation. But his words rang hollow against what they'd all witnessed. The committee's questions grew more pointed, more specific, digging beyond this single incident to the pattern it revealed. Through it all, Maya maintained her judicial demeanor. Fair, attentive, allowing all parties to speak while keeping the proceedings focused on facts rather than emotions. As the questioning intensified, something unexpected emerged. One committee member asked about the previous dismissed complaints, the lack of disciplinary action despite multiple incidents. The Internal Affairs representative squirmed visibly. Questions about who had intervened in previous investigations led to reluctant admissions about procedural irregularities. Names were mentioned: a captain, a union representative, a city councilman. Caldwell watched his support system unraveling in real time. His confident facade cracked, then shattered. "This is a witch hunt," he suddenly shouted, rising from his chair. "You're all turning against your own to appease the mob." His attorney tried to calm him, but Caldwell was beyond reaching. "Everything I did was by the book. I was taught by the best officers in this department, following their example. If I'm guilty, they all are." The outburst confirmed what the evidence suggested: not just one officer's misconduct, but a culture that encouraged and protected it. When the final verdict came 3 hours later, it was unanimous. Officer James Caldwell would be permanently removed from duty, his pension revoked. The findings referred to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. As Maya gathered her papers at the conclusion, her phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "This isn't over. The system is bigger than you." She looked up at the now empty chair where Caldwell had sat, at the supporters who had quickly disappeared once the outcome became clear. They were right about one thing: this wasn't over. It was just beginning. What would you have done in Judge Maya's position? Let me know if you would have recused yourself or stayed on the case despite the danger. 1 year later, Maya stood before a group of teenagers at the East Side Community Center, her natural hair grown out into a short, elegant style. "No wig today. These rights aren't abstract," she explained, gesturing to the presentation slide behind her. "They're your shield in everyday situations. When an officer asks to search your bag, your phone, your car, knowing when you can say no might be the difference between freedom and handcuffs." The students leaned forward, engaged by her direct approach. These weren't hypothetical scenarios for them. They were Tuesday afternoons, Saturday nights, daily realities. On the wall behind them hung a framed news article: "Williams Commission Recommendations Adopted. Police Reform Takes Center Stage." The commission she'd been asked to lead after the Caldwell case had uncovered exactly what she'd suspected: a network of protection and privilege that had allowed abuses to continue for years. After the session, Maya gathered her materials, catching a glimpse of herself in the reflection of a window. Sometimes she still wore the wig, a personal choice rather than a defense mechanism now. Sometimes she didn't. The freedom to choose felt like its own small victory. At a restaurant across town that evening, not Denny's, she hadn't been back. A uniformed officer approached her table. Her body tensed automatically, an old reflex. "Judge Williams?" the young officer said, maintaining a respectful distance. "I just wanted to thank you. Your work on the commission has changed how we're trained. It's making a difference." Maya nodded, studying his face for any sign of insincerity but finding none. "Thank you, officer," she replied. "That's good to hear." As he walked away, she reflected on how one moment of refusing to be intimidated had cascaded into real change. Not enough, not yet, but a beginning. The bruise on her cheek had long since faded, but its impact remained, in policy changes, in training reforms, in accountability measures that might prevent another Maya, another teenager with a knee on his neck, another victim without a judge's authority to protect them. Justice requires courage. It demands that someone stand firm when standing firm carries risk. Change always comes at a cost, but the price of silence is far higher. Maybe someday these confrontations won't be necessary. Maybe the next generation of officers will truly protect and serve all communities equally. Maybe the teenagers she'd just taught would find a world more just than the one she'd navigated. Until then, she would keep doing the work, one case at a time, one reform at a time, one moment of courage at a time. Because justice isn't just a word in law books. It's what happens when ordinary people refuse to be treated as less than human. And sometimes, justice begins with a simple act, like removing a wig and standing in your truth, regardless of the consequences.